Hello and welcome to another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Jamie Johnson from the Lohman Abdo Law Firm here in Hudson, Wisconsin, and host of the Political and Government section of Western Wisconsin Journal. And I have with me a familiar face and friend, Dayrl Standafer. Dayrl?
Jamie?
Welcome back to the show.
Thanks.
Daryl's been here before as the County Board Chair for St. Croix County. And how many years have you been serving in that capacity as Chair?
I am in my fourth year.
Fourth year, and you've been on the board for longer than that?
I've been on the board, this is my 20th year.
And you've also been leader in the village in North Hudson as well?
I'm on the Board of Trustees.
Okay. So one of the subjects we're going to get into is the Intergovernmental Council, because now that I've attended one of those meetings as a prospective member from the school board anyway.
I should ask you your viewpoint of the Intergovernmental Council.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a joint interview of each other then on that. But what I wanted to do was kind of take, we've talked about some topics here before, and maybe pick those up. Like for instance, the county nursing home and the county farm. These are county assets, and we've talked about the county getting out of maybe what should be in the private sector. Tell us where things stand on the county farm, because we've seen a lot of activity lately there, and maybe the nursing home as well.
Well, we did successfully transition the county farm to private ownership in February. That asset, which historically years and years ago, like a lot of counties, St. Croix County had what was called a county poor farm, and residents actually worked in terms of providing labor on that farm, field labor, livestock, dairy herds, extensive swine operation. And gradually, as it transitioned from a poor farm, there was an insane asylum on the campus. That, of course, is also long gone. But the dairy herd continued until 1990. We transitioned at that point out of the active livestock business, and the herd was sold. It was an outstanding herd of registered Holsteins. I mean, that's my background. I still consider myself a farm boy. I grew up in that industry in southern Minnesota, and it was an outstanding herd of registered Holsteins. But it gradually got to the point where it was, I think, an awareness that that was not something that government should be in, and so the herd was sold.
So if it's been that long since the herd was sold, why are we just selling it now in February of 2013?
We are getting out of those assets incrementally, I would say. There's a great amount of residual emotion and inertia in a long-held asset like that. So even after we got out of the dairy herd, we rented out the dairy buildings and the facilities to local dairymen. But gradually it became pretty clear that the maintenance and the upkeep on the facilities was outstripping what we were collecting in rent, and so we transitioned out of that, and the buildings were demolished. We continued to rent out the land, but gradually by last year, it became an awareness that this property serves no long-term strategic need for the county. And we had other needs. We had capital needs, and we tend to be pretty debt adverse at the county. And here was an asset that we were never going to need, the 500 plus acres of farmland, and it was not appropriate for the county to continue to sit on that asset and hold it off the property tax rolls. And so after all of that period of time, that big chunk of land right adjacent to the northern border of New Richmond is now sold. It's in private ownership. It's on the tax rolls. We have the liquidity now. It's cash, and it will be used for infrastructure projects. Okay,
that's what you took my next question, is what it's going to be used for, and I know we're going to talk a little bit later about long-term capital needs, but also in old business, we had the recent triple homicide case.
Yes.
Tragedy in River Falls, and the necessity for having a trial because there was not, a plea. Well, there was a plea, and it was a plea of insanity or not guilty by reason of insanity, and so that required lots of experts and obviously took a lot of time. While we've heard the verdict, and I think the sentencing is set for sometime in July, why don't you tell us what's the impact on the county for holding a trial such as this, and the people power, if you will. I was going to say manpower, but the people power required to put on a trial like that.
Well, it was significant, not only in terms of the, shall we say, the emotional impact and the stress impact on a lot of our county departments, but obviously the financial impact. We had county board meeting last night, and Administrator Pat Thompson gave a shout out to a number of the departments that went above and beyond. This is not something that you expect to happen. So it's not a normal business activity to have a high-profile homicide case like that. And a number of people in the public, frankly, were puzzled about the case because it was never a question of was the gentleman guilty or not. And in fact, the trial was not held to determine his guilt. It was held to determine whether or not he was legally sane at the time. And that went a period of time, and the verdict was rendered, and you're right, he continues to be held, incarcerated in the county jail, and will be sentenced in July.
So it's
but
not,
the impact, where I was going with the double impact, the impact to us was the fact that there was a significant expense that was, of course, unplanned. We did not know that was going to happen, and so all of that was unbudgeted.
Well, first of all, it's been over 20 years, I know, when the prosecutors became state employees, and so that part doesn't change from the county standpoint, but counties still are responsible for their prosecutions and costs of witnesses, paying officers, overtime, and so forth. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, and in addition, we are still waiting for the invoice for AAG Freiberg's expenses, and they are anticipated to be significant.
And AAG, you're referring to Assistant Attorney General?
Right. Gary Freiberg.
Because the county
will pay those expenses.
So instead of having one of our own prosecutors do it,
that's correct.
It was deferred or referred to the Department of Justice, which is not unusual for certainly smaller counties to bring in an Assistant Attorney General, but certainly on high-profile cases.
Because of the high-profile nature of this. And this impacted a lot of our departments, of course. I mean, obviously the Sheriff's Department, the defendant has been incarcerated, by July, when he'll be sentenced for approximately a year. And, our average cost of incarceration at the county jail is, in the neighborhood of about $92 a day, I think, right now for, all-in costs, overhead. And
sure, and that's just for an average inmate.
This would still be an average inmate from the standpoint of the same medical, the same overhead burden, the same meal costs, but the point is for that year that'll be over $33,000. The costs to other departments, clerk of court, witness fees, etc., we've already expensed over $106,000. That does not include the expenses of Prosecutor Freiberg, and we don't have all the expenses in from all the departments. So you can see this is going to be a fairly significant financial burden to the taxpayers of St. Croix County, and as I indicated, that has to come out of reserves because it was not a budgeted expense item.
Well, and two of the things, we can transition now if we will, but two of the items out of that trial that showed, one, security.
Yes.
I don't want to say defects, but items that need attention at our courthouse are security, number one, because you have only 2 courtrooms that are secure for transportation of prisoners without having to take them out into common. And so there had to be a lot of shuffling of courtrooms, I know, because I was up there during the trial. And the other was just security at the door as well. There's other counties similar to our size or bigger, for instance, our neighboring county, Washington County, obviously much bigger, but they have, I think they spent over $1 million, well over $1 million, just redoing their security for metal detectors and so forth. So the courtrooms and then getting into the courthouse. Talk about that.
Well, first of all, I think it's important simply to say that I'm disappointed that we are in an environment, society is in an environment where those kinds of things have now become the normal, that we need that level of security to conduct activities in daily business. The coarsening of society I find distressing and disappointing. Having said that, I think this trial caused us to learn some things. I'm not prepared to say that we uncovered defects, because I think our security has been good, and I think the Sheriff's Department and the courthouse security that we have has been fine. And I would point to the fact that there was, as you are aware, I'm sure, an incident during the trial where an individual was able to get a couple of knives up to the courtroom, but was apprehended. The weapons were found, and it was handled appropriately. It was handled up at the courtroom.
Was that during the frisking procedure as they were entering the courtroom?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Okay.
The point I'm making is it was not discovered at the entrance, but it was discovered up at the courtroom. Right. But it was handled appropriately. But as a result of that, as an additional abundance of caution for the remainder of the trial, the Sheriff's Department did set up a checkpoint at the main entrance, did not allow even employees to come in other entrances, so every person entering the government center came through the one entrance and went through a metal detector and was in fact searched. That is not in place at the present time. We are evaluating whether or not that should be a permanent fixture at the government center. As I said, I find it distressing that we are in an environment where that may be necessary.
And you have to evaluate things. Is it, and I hate to use this terrible pun, but overkill to swat a small fly with a huge fly swatter, something that really increases the cost to the taxpayers? Is it needed? That needs to be looked at. But I was talking to Lori Meyer, the clerk at court, and it's really not the criminal cases generally that cause the concern of staff and those in the courthouse regarding security. It's the family law cases and the injunctions and restraining orders.
Those are the ones that generate a great amount of emotion and stress. And you're right. Those are the ones where the passions run high, the emotions run high. We have, I think, appropriately to this point handled all of those, and we'll handle them in the future. It's the methodology that we use that is under review.
Certainly. Well, let's go to those the long-term capital needs, because we were talking about court space and improved security, which I want to echo too. I agree. I think that some of the changes that they've implemented, I've seen a lot over the last 23 years up at, well, first the old courthouse, the building we're in now, and now the new courthouse, that things are safer, and we've got great personnel there. It's just that you can't have people in all places, and cameras only go so far in being able to stop a situation. So what, from the long-term capital needs, what do you see as far as additional courtrooms, a separate building? What do you see there?
Well, I think there are probably two quick responses. One, because the first one because it is current reality, but it has a long-term impact, and the other is a little bit more visionary. Taking them in that order, the first one, and it will be a use of proceeds from the sale of the farm, is the expansion and the remodeling of the 911 dispatch center.
Right.
St. Croix County dispatches for most of the other municipal agencies in St. Croix County, and we are already having some informal, I would stress the informal because this has got a ways to go, but we believe there is a possibility to dispatch for Pierce County. And we're having some informal conversations with Pierce County. I'm hopeful that this might transition into an opportunity. And I think it illustrates the fact that there's an awareness that we can't do all things independently. And we've been trying to do more things collaboratively and cooperatively, not only with jurisdictions within St. Croix County, and that goes back to the way you started, the Intergovernmental Coordinating Council, where we're trying to do some things locally with different jurisdictions. But this would be innovative if we could join with Pierce County and leverage the fact that this kind of an expensive project, and once it's all done, the expansion and over a couple of phases, the kind of technology upgrades that are necessary in today's environment, that is approaching about an $8 million project.
I was just going to say, this is not a small investment.
No, it's a huge investment. And so if we can leverage that over a bigger horizon, it's not only good for the taxpayers of St. Croix County, but potentially it would be good for the taxpayers of another jurisdiction, where we can share that cost over a bigger horizon.
Right.
And I just think that government needs to find more and more ways to do those kinds of things.
Excellent point. With the technology changing like it is, and it being such a huge investment that, you know, it changes so fast if you can share that expense.
Absolutely. And then that leads me into the one that's perhaps more visionary.
Right.
And that is somewhat analogous back to the point you made, Jamie, about the courtrooms and security. And we have 2 secured courtrooms from the standpoint of transport of defendants from incarceration, and 2 that are not. At some point in the foreseeable future, and I can't pinpoint when that will be, but let's say 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, we know that there will be a need for another courtroom in St. Croix County. I mean, we know that is coming at some point. So trying to be as far ahead of the power curve as possible, we're exploring whether or not it makes sense to add on to the existing government center, which our building would be expensive to add on to with the upgrades that we need for security, and recognizing the fact that we have other space needs in the county. Now, we're currently considering the possibility of leasing space to move some of our employees from the New Richmond campus in the Health and Human Services building into lease space, so we can demolition that building. I'm not talking about the nursing home. I'm talking about employees that are in our various Health and Human Services activities, because that is a functionally obsolete building. It does not justify continued investments, and so over the next several years, we'll learn some things in terms of how people need to work, how much space they need, where that should be. Ultimately, when we build a building, we'll have a better idea than say, right now they're in this much space, let's build a new building. Because we know we need less space than that with technology and people working sometimes at clients' offices or at staggered hours, all kinds of different things. So as we're exploring the court situation and that situation, we're starting to realize that it may make some sense, and I stress the may, it may make some sense to look at a separate stand-alone, call it a judicial building, call it a public safety building, someplace on the campus adjacent to the government center, but it would be available for the court system, maybe the DA, clerk of court, those kinds of functions, and possibly in cooperation with, for instance, the City of Hudson. The City of Hudson has some needs coming down the road in terms of a police department and a public safety building. So going back to my conversation about the dispatch center, here is another example where there are some very informal conversations going on to simply say, we both have needs.
Right.
We both have limited budgets. Are there ways that we could do things cooperatively to maximize a capital investment that we're making on behalf of taxpayers and get better utilization out of it? So part of the vision I've got is to see if there's a possibility to combine needs that we've got, needs that the City of Hudson has. I've had informal conversation with the mayor on this, and we both agree that the subject deserves exploration, and we will do that.
Well, I think what you're talking about is similar. Polk County's, built a new Justice Center, and they've used the old courthouse for their other governmental functions, trying to keep things that are similar in function.
Eau Claire County and the City of Eau Claire, another good example. They are cooperating not only in terms of physical space, but they've even co-located. That may be a bit of a stretch for what I'm talking about, but I don't know, 5 years down the road maybe. They've even co-located Eau Claire County Sheriff's Department and City of Eau Claire Police Department in the same space, and they even have some employees that are working for both agencies. I just think that we need to have the ability to see beyond the way we've always done things and say, are there ways to do things better?
Interesting. Well, yeah, now on the Intergovernmental Council, I guess on my checklist, that's the one we haven't got to yet. But
what did you think?
Well, there was, yeah, we had our a meeting.
You were at our last meeting.
Right, and it's interesting to have representatives from the municipalities, which includes the Village of North Hudson, the townships, which included St. Joe, Troy, Hudson, and the city of Hudson, and a couple representatives from each, and then the county
and the school district.
And there's overlap, and I thought there was good discussions and ideas put informally out there, but who knows what can be spurred from those discussions. So
well, and you probably heard that there are some things that have already had some tangible results. The county already is doing some joint purchasing with the school district.
On the gasoline?
On the gasoline and some supplies, taking advantage of efficiency in terms of economies of scale. There have been some conversations that have come out of that in terms of sharing some assets. The Village of North Hudson and the City of Hudson are having some informal conversations about salt storage and some activities again to do the things that we all need to do, but are there ways to do them at lower cost than for all of us simply to say, okay, this is what we need, we're going to do it ourselves. And one of the big frustrations I have is when you see capital assets in any jurisdiction, trucks or street sweepers or other expensive pieces of equipment sitting around when they could be used someplace else. If you could leverage the hours you're putting on something, leasing it to another jurisdiction or allowing them to use it, rather than sitting in some public works garage someplace, I just think that's a plus.
I think they've even done that, some counties have done that for prosecutors. If they only need another half prosecutor, they split it with Pierce County and
share personnel.
Right, and in an age when we're so budget conscious and debt is a huge problem, especially on the state and the federal level, that trying to increase our efficiencies and eliminate duplication. It's very frustrating to see 3 agencies that do the same thing and all carrying on, and if we can eliminate that duplication, that would seem to help. Well, is there anything else? I think we've touched upon everything. Well, it sounds like the county has plenty to do, and how do you see the economic outlook? I guess let's end with that. We've seen some very slow, positive movement, and some big impact, though, on both the state and the federal outlooks for our deficits, just by dropping our unemployment rate 1 or 2%. What do you see, given that St. Croix County really is part of the metro, and we have enjoyed not as deep of a or lasting of an impression from this last recession as has been affected other parts of the state?
Right. Well, clearly there are some indicators out there that things are modestly improving. I would say we're out of the woods, but I think the trends look good at this point. Speaking specifically only from the standpoint of the county, we're now seeing some evidence of an increase in activities for building permits, as evidenced at the county by sanitary sewer permits. We're seeing some activity as far as developments, where developers are now coming back to the table and ready to begin to move forward on some delayed activities. I can say that we're starting to see some trends in reduction in delinquent property taxes. That's encouraging. We've not been faced with an abundance of tax delinquent properties. As you're aware, it would take 3 years of delinquency to get up to a tax deed. We've had a relatively few. I find that encouraging. So I think there is evidence that the trends are looking optimistic.
Are the foreclosures finally leveling off, or maybe slightly down?
Well, they're slowing down. I mean, there are a lot of reasons for foreclosures. They're slowing down, and by that I mean the number that the sheriff has as far as the sheriff sales that we conduct. When it gets to that point in terms of the foreclosure process, that number is declining. So that's another indicator. Certainly one strong economic plus on the immediate horizon is the fact that we're beginning construction of the new river crossing this spring. That has been a long and arduous process for a number of us that were involved in that.
Well, I was a little chagrined to see that we've got a delay currently, and we've got some pending litigation.
The delay has been resolved. The judge has now indicated that there's not going to be an injunction. Work is going to proceed. Indicated that the suit that is brought by
it's one of the subcontractors.
Subcontractor, and it's not the bridge. It's approach work on Highway 36 on the Minnesota side. That his suit is unlikely to prevail. So the injunction has not been granted, and the contract has then been awarded to another entity, and work is proceeding.
And the other delay was the zebra mussels. There was actually dead zebra mussels.
That's also been resolved.
Good.
But the work on the wet piers begins this year, and as a matter of fact, I can announce publicly that the official groundbreaking for the project, and this is, when I say the project, it's all the approach work on both sides,
Sure.
It's the bridge, it's the whole project itself, will be on the 28th of May at 2:30 in the afternoon at Lowell Park in Stillwater. We have commitment for both governors to be there. Governor Walker and Governor Dayton will both be there. Senator Klobuchar, who carried this bill in the Senate and was very instrumental in its success at the Congress, will be there. Received confirmation this morning from Congressman Duffy that he'll be there. Congressman Kind has committed. So we're really pleased that this project now we can start to see the fact that it's going to be a reality by 2016.
That would be the day after Memorial Day then.
I don't have the calendar fixed in my mind, but it's the 28th.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's good. And again, that's about a 30-month expectation from this groundbreaking to when traffic will be able to go?
The expectation is the fall of 2016, traffic will be ready to cross that bridge.
Okay. Wonderful. And then we get back to these needs of a growing county. I mean, even though we had a recession and some leveling off of growth projections, it doesn't stop the fact that St. Croix County is still one of the leaders in the state in that regard.
Well, it certainly is. I guess the reason I was highlighting the bridge at this point is that's going to be a tremendous jobs project as well. Right. It's not only a sorely needed infrastructure project, but it's going to be a major jobs project for the St. Croix Valley, and that is going to be a strong boost to the local economy as well.
Great. A great point to end on. Thanks again for coming.
Jamie, thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Same here, and thank you for joining us for another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. Please contact us with any comments or thoughts for future subjects. I hope Daryl will be back, tell us about the state of St. Croix County in another year.
Thank you.
And thank you.